Hello, world. Welcome to the Women of BSV. We are delighted to have as our guest today Charles Miller, senior producer of Coingeek, and someone that has had many of us here in the hot seat before. So today we have him. Welcome, Charles.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be one of the women of BSV, if just for today, perhaps, anyway.
We can make you a more permanent member of the Women of BSV, right, Charles? It's nice that you're here as well.
Charles, that is a beautiful piece of furniture and bookcase behind you. So
Right.
please tell us about it and all of those beautiful books that you have there.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it. It's a book. It is quite an old bookcase. It was inherited from my mum, who sadly died about 7 years ago, I think. And one of the things I wanted to keep from her house, because I think she probably got it from, in fact, I think it was my father's family. So it is a bit of a family heirloom, and all the books in it sort of came with it. And I haven't really read any of them, except there was one that I read at the start of COVID about the Great Plague of London. And that was really interesting to sort of find that we had a book about the plague and that there were so many similarities between the situation in the 17th century and what was going on with COVID lockdowns, with rich people being able to leave London and that sort of thing. Quite a lot of parallels, actually. So, one day maybe I'll get around to reading more of them. But yeah, that's the story of the bookcase.
So nothing's really
Are they
changed.
classics or?
Yes, they are classics. They're sort of poets and dictionaries of music and stuff like that. I just like, I'm a sort of collector of old books, actually. You can see the rest of the house. It's actually stuffed with books that I've mostly bought myself out of secondhand bookshops and stuff. So yeah, we just need a bigger house with more bookshelves in it, really.
Who's your favourite author?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm a bit of a fan of Anthony Trollope, but I'm doing some studying at the moment, and one of the people I'm studying is Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I like his novels, and particularly reading his really rather enormous notebooks about his time in Britain. So it's sort of like an American view of Britain in about 1854 or something.
Oh, right.
He was there for a few years, and he was the American consul in Liverpool. And so he got given the job by his old school friend, Franklin Pierce, who had become president of the United States, and appointed Hawthorne as the consul. And he'd had a few successful novels already, Scarlet Letter and things. And he was still a little bit insecure financially, so he was very pleased to get this rather well-paid job in Liverpool that didn't really require too much work. And he was able to go around the UK and wrote his notebooks about it. And it's really interesting because, like any sort of well-educated American around that time, he was extremely well informed about Britain because he'd read all Walter Scott's novels. He knew a lot of British history, and he knew about Wordsworth and the Lake District and all sorts of things. And so he was sort of seeing things in front of his eyes that had been part of his imaginative life for years, because he was about 50 by the time he arrived. Anyway, yeah.
Wow. Sounds a bit like a 19th century Bill Bryson, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it was in a way, I suppose. I mean, although Bill Bryson was there sort of to do that tour and write about it, whereas Hawthorne, it was a little bit more incidental. He just had the opportunity of writing and going on this tour with his family. So yeah, but yeah, it's always interesting to see what the sort of transatlantic perceptions are. Many of them kind of pretty much the same today as they were back then.
And was he disappointed?
No, I was.
Well, he was a little bit. He he was sort of torn in a way, because he was very patriotic as an American, and sort of thought that the American political system was better than what he saw as a very elitist and class-based system in Britain. But he was also very sort of won over by beautiful stately homes that he visited, and quite liked the idea that places would be passed down from generation to generation in a family, rather than in America, where people were sort of on the move the whole time, and they didn't expect that the house that they lived in was ever likely to be lived in by somebody, by their children or their grandchildren or anything like that. Of course, that only applied in Britain to the wealthiest aristocracy and so on. But sort of almost despite himself, he quite liked what he saw, and then had to kind of apologize for liking it, you know.
It's hard not to like the stately homes in England, isn't it? I mean, they're just breathtaking, a lot of them. Yeah.
The
I was
garden.
just wondering, did he come over on a tour ship then? Because I know Liverpool still have tour ships.
Yeah, I mean, I think he came over on one of it was almost the end of the sailing era, and the steamships hadn't quite arrived, but they were going to, I think it was maybe a mixture of steam and sail at that point. But yeah, Liverpool was a sort of tremendously, it was really the most successful port in the world, I think, at the time. And all Americans ended up arrived in Liverpool. That would seem to be where it was. And then they were rather sort of shocked, because Liverpool appeared to them a more modern city than New York, which they'd mostly left, or they might have left from Boston. So they were immediately slightly thrown off their expectations, because the docks were bigger and there were more ships there, and it was just seemed like a more bustling place than they'd left, which was not what they were expecting. But then most of them went to Chester, which was a very
Beautiful
old city, kind of close to Liverpool. And then they got all their sort of expectations of what Britain was supposed to be like confirmed there, and what a quaint place it was with the city walls and all that kind of thing. So
yeah. I know it's interesting, because you come along the Mersey and you get struck by the Liver building and the Albert Dock, and that's quite a spectacular area. But like you say, when you go to Chester, it's very small, with all the beamed houses and the beamed frontages,
Very
and
pretty,
the
though.
wall and everything.
but I think that dockland, the dock area, has been declared, or was declared, a World Heritage Site.
Yeah.
But then I read something about, because the local council or city council hadn't been careful enough with developments around it, it's now been undeclared a World Heritage Site. But it's still there, I suppose, the docks. I haven't been to Liverpool, but I wasn't really paying attention to the docks.
I've been there a few times, but I do remember there used to be I don't know what channel it was on, but there was a guy called Fred who was the weatherman, and there used to be like
Fred Talbot.
and there was a floating like Britain.
The map.
He used to do the weather on
This morning, wasn't it? Yeah.
The mini.
Yeah, you had to leap between the islands.
Yeah. You worked for the BBC.
Yeah.
I'm quite intrigued. How did you? So let's start then. How did you get involved with the BBC? Where was that from? Is that from your literature, your love of literature?
No, not really. I actually I got on a training scheme when I left university.
All right.
And I'd done some journalism at university, and I'd worked for the local newspaper and stuff like that. So I got on this, in London. And so I got on this television research training scheme, which is a way that they just recruit graduates to become TV producers, basically. So that's how I got going, and really stayed there for quite a long time. Was able to get involved in all sorts of different kinds of programs, really. Then I also worked a bit for Channel 4 and ITV and stuff.
This is the thing, because when I think you're such a familiar voice and face to me, But I was thinking back and thinking, but which programs was he in? And I really struggled to. I know it's technology based things. Tell us a few of the things that you've
Well,
been in
the thing
over
is,
the years.
you wouldn't have really come across me because most of the time I was producing and directing, not being on camera. I mean, I might have thrown the odd question off camera in an interview that you might have heard, but almost all of it was, working with presenters and directing them and producing those kind of documentaries and stuff. So maybe I've got a sort of typical BBC voice, but you wouldn't really have recognized it
No,
from
I'd
watching
definitely
the
have
BBC.
heard you things, but I couldn't tell you exactly what. Was there,
Well,
maybe documentaries and things, perhaps?
well, yeah, I've done I've read out the commentary on the odd documentary, but really it's so rare that I'd be very surprised if you identified that.
Is there any particular one that stands out more than the others that you really thoroughly enjoyed doing?
Well, I suppose before I left the BBC, which was like I joined Coingeek about 3 years ago. I spent a few years doing individual documentaries, one-off documentaries for BBC Two, which were mostly about tech companies. So I did one about Microsoft with Bill Gates, and I did Facebook and Amazon and stuff like that. So each of those was an hour long on BBC Two, and they took like 6 months to a year to do. So that was great because I got an opportunity to really go into something in depth and really learn about how these businesses worked. So yeah, I really enjoyed those. But then early when I was working with the BBC, I used to work on studio shows, talk shows, and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that as well.
With the documentaries, were they kind of small teams? How big?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty small. I mean, if to make say a 60-minute thing for BBC Two in a sort of 6 months, then probably I would have, if I was the producer, which is also normally the director as well, then I might just have an assistant producer, maybe a production assistant, and then when you get further down the production process towards editing, then we'd have an editor. So other people and camera operators and people and sound recorders would come in sort of as and when, but the sort of core team would probably be just 2 or 3 people, really.
Yeah, there's a lot of research involved, isn't there, before you start actually shooting stuff?
Yes, exactly. The actual shooting period of it is really comparatively small because what often takes the longest time is to persuade the people that you want to film to agree to actually be in the program in the first place. That's a long and tedious process, but requires a lot of patience and cunning, perhaps.
Is there anything that you would still like to, is there anybody in particular, if you could interview anybody, is there anybody in particular in the world that you would actually really love to do a documentary on?
Well, I would really like to sit down with the 2 founders of Google, I must say. And I did, in fact, direct a piece with Sergey Brin back in probably 2000, when Google was a pretty small company with just maybe 50 people or something. And so I did get to sort of speak to him and go to their offices and stuff. But I just think, what they've done is so incredible. And it would be, and such an interesting sort of combination of characters as well. I think they'd be really interesting. Of course, Elon Musk would be terrific as well. So
That'll
yeah,
be a lot of fun. Yeah.
So how did you transition to Coingeek then? How did that work? Did you
I just applied for the job actually. Well, what happened was that my whole department at the BBC was being moved from London to Birmingham, and I didn't want to move to Birmingham. My family didn't want to move to Birmingham, so I took the redundancy money and looked for a job. And I mean, although I hadn't really had anything to do with Bitcoin, well, it hadn't had anything to do with Bitcoin. It sort of, in my mind, came under the heading of new technology and new kinds of businesses and stuff. And so that was what I tried to persuade them when I tried to get the job, that it was because I'd spent quite a lot of, I mean, I'd made those documentaries that I mentioned, but I'd also made stuff before that about the early days of the internet, around 99, 2000, and following startup companies who were starting their dot-com businesses. And so the idea of, small startups trying to invent a new kind of business, as we have in the Bitcoin space, is something that I'm really interested in, and is sort of familiar-ish from those other things around the internet. Some of the issues are definitely the same.
Yeah. But I mean, from the 90s though, I mean, it's kind of quite a long-standing passion that you've had then to continue through with this technology kind of based.
Well, it is. In fact, I think I may have diverted between then and Bitcoin into other things to do with. I did some stuff about documentaries on politics, and I did some history things as well. So it hasn't been absolutely continuous during that period, but I sort of came back to it with the sort of the documentaries that I was talking about. Yeah.
I worked at Birmingham Studios. I used to do Doctors, and I did an episode of Brum.
Wow!
So I'm not surprised you didn't want to move there.
Well, but Doctors is a daily. I don't know whether we're allowed to call it a continuing drama, not a soap.
Yeah. It was when Christopher Timothy was in it, because I'd worked with him before at Nottingham Playhouse. But
and who were you in it?
Huh?
Who were you?
I was just a regular patient.
With a problem they couldn't. Did you have a different illness each time?
I was just a hypochondriac. I mean, one day I did end up on a bin wagon as an assistant to the driver on the bin wagon. But usually I was a hypochondriac kind of patient who just was sitting in the waiting room. Nothing spectacular. But it's where they had the radio studios were there as well. But yeah, Doctors is a regularly ongoing, and I think Doctors is still ongoing. And then Brum was a children's program with this little car.
I remember.
Yeah. And like this little like antique car, kind of about this big, remote controlled, and he was yellow, and he got little lights that were eyes, and his doors used to flap.
What were you doing with that?
I just did one episode. It was in a gym, but it was very Panto-esque kind of over. Everything was like the grotto. Everything was really over exaggerated because it was a children's TV program. So I was in a gym, and I was on a rowing machine, and I was on a running machine, and I had to wave at Brum a couple of times, and then in a tennis court, and then outside the gym, and just waving, like.
When I was in the Birmingham office, the thing that I noticed was that they did the archers there every day.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And we were allowed to go into the archers' studio, and sort of. It was quite funny because they have all these sort of set sound effects. There's the doorbell for such and such house,
the
and
farm noises,
the farm gate, and everything. And
sorry, what is this? This is
the Archers. It's like an institution. It's like a 15-minute play every day.
It's
an ongoing storyline. I used to listen to it myself religiously.
It's been going for years. I mean,
years.
How long
has it this is the essence of British culture.
No, it is.
It
is. I set on in a village. Hiya, Micah.
Yeah, how long has the Archers been going?
I think it's sort of pretty much since the war,
60
because
years.
it was a BBC thing, I think, to sort of provide a very easy kind of education for farmers and people in agricultural communities, because isn't it called An Everyday Tale of Country Folk or something?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
But now they I think I don't really listen to it, but they go out of their way to introduce sort of much more contemporary issues into the same village.
Yeah. I haven't listened to it for years, but I used to.
Any sort of social problem that you've heard
Yeah.
about in the news will pop up in the Archers quite quickly now, I think.
Have you ever done any cameo appearances in like any soap operas, EastEnders or Coronation Street?
No, I just have not been involved with the world of acting at all, really. I mean, not as an actor
directing
anyway.
Sometimes there's an opportunity, isn't there, just to sort of be an extra in the
Oh,
bar
I see.
sort of thing, Peggy's pub when Queen
No, I haven't been able to do that, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, The Mighty Boosh is a huge hit. BBC Three, and they started as a radio play.
Yeah.
So
building.
you mentioned this Arches, but what are some other traditional British radio plays that everyone should know about?
Oh gosh.
God, no, you're asking.
I don't know that there are any like the Archers that
No,
have
the
been going
Archers is
anything like as
really-
long as that.
Yeah.
It's like Coronation Street, which is the TV thing. That
Or- yeah.
And then then there's EastEnders is the BBC.
It's
Yeah.
nowhere near as old, is it? Really? I mean, it's probably about 30
EastEnders has been going since about the 80s, I think, because I remember it's when it started.
Yeah, there used to be a thing called Brookside, which was set in Liverpool, but they ended up. I think somebody ended up murdering their husband and buried him under the patio, and then there was Crossroads, which started and then finished, and then
God, that was Birmingham, wasn't
That
it?
was in
Crossroads.
as well. That was filmed in Nottingham for the second. And then there was Last of the Summer Wine, which I know has been imported to quite a few.
Oh yeah, that was Yorkshire, wasn't it?
But I think that was quite small.
The funny thing is, when you as a Brit visiting the States, sort of in maybe 10, 20 years ago, it was odd because people were always going on about "Are you being served?"
Oh gosh, yeah.
It was on PBS, I think, but it was always when I first went to the States, which was ages ago, it was always "Are you being served?" or Benny Hill or Alistair Cook's Masterpiece Theatre. Those are the sort of 3 points of reference, but they were all sort of completely different, really, from each other, and really not as important in the UK as perhaps a lot of Americans thought they were.
That's true.
Yes, that's right. The "Are You Being Served?" I remember people watching that, definitely, back in the 80s and 90s.
Mrs. Slocum with a, what was it, purple hair, wasn't it? And
yes, and they were all in the shopping mall.
That's
but
right.
we used to get American shows, which probably are sometimes more familiar in Britain. So I remember watching Bonanza. Did you ever come across that? The cowboy thing. And then there were things like, there was I Love Lucy, but that was very big.
I love that.
Anyway. And then there's one that I always remember, which I used to watch as a child, called Green Acres, which I'd like to see again. I'm always meaning to look on YouTube. I bet Green Acres is there.
Yes.
Does that ring a bell?
No, but Anne of Green Gables does.
Yes.
Exactly. Anne of Green Gables.
Oh, I love that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Mr. Ed? Mr. Ed used to get me.
Oh yeah, Mr. Ed. He scared me a little bit. Yeah, the talking horse.
It was a bit weird.
Yeah, so how about you, Micah? Did you see any British shows there in Germany?
Not particularly. I don't know. I think we are more influenced from American
probably
culture and everything.
Did you have you come across Fawlty Towers?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
No. Well, because I thought there was a bit of a sort of references to the war that were potentially offensive if they were shown in Germany.
Mike is quite young though, Joe. I mean, Mike is.
Maybe I rather know the German title. I don't know the English title. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With John Cleese, maybe John. Well, maybe this kind of humor doesn't really translate very well.
Is it like Monty Python stuff? Or?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same.
This is very popular here. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So the question is, Charles, do you watch TV anymore? I mean, because technology's moved on so much, and we can all remember these shows that everybody used to sit down and watch. I mean, I used to listen to the radio endlessly before we had the internet. But now I've got like podcasts I can listen to. I don't bother with Radio 4, which is maybe a shame. I don't know. But how about you? Do you actually still listen to the BBC and watch
Well,
television like you
I
used
do
to?
listen to the radio, Radio 4. But yeah, in terms of watching television, I mean, people have been talking for so long about the fact that about sort of channels not being as important as they were, and that has really happened now. I think people don't say, "Oh, let's see what's on." It's what do you want to watch, isn't it? And so, yeah, I never just sit down and sort of see what's on. I'm always just typically going to Netflix or something. It's much more like picking up a book, so that if you might read a chapter or something and then come back tomorrow and read a bit more, isn't it? I mean, and these, it's sometimes surprising to me to sort of catch a daily sort of news magazine show or comedy or cooking show and sort of think, oh, well, there are still people
This is still
watching
going on.
that, you know. But certainly, I mean, I've got my children they never think about, I don't think many people would really think about tuning into the BBC and seeing what they've got on today, really. It's a different thing altogether now, isn't it?
Occasionally, I think it's a bit of a loss because, like, when I was a kid, we used to watch all the wildlife programs together, all the David Attenboroughs and stuff. And we used to always watch the Christmas wreath lectures. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
The Christmas and lecture. It was kind of an event, wasn't it? And you'd sit around with your family and watch it. And that's just not something.
But you could do that still. You could still find something on Netflix that was suitable for everyone and watch it.
But you know what it was like when there was nothing else to watch? It's like you watched it because it was on.
The good old days when you had to watch it.
Yeah, BBC, ITV, and one other, was it Granada or something? It was like channels at one point.
Yeah, we're old enough that we remember when they used to switch the TV off at night, aren't we, Diddy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The girl with the test card.
Yeah.
Yes.
What about music, Charles? What kind of music do you like?
I would say sort of jazz, really. I like Van Morrison very much, actually. I just saw a great. There's a great thing on YouTube which I watched recently of him, where he's just in some studio in, I think it's in Ireland, and there's no audience. And he just plays through about sort of 20 tracks with an amazing band. And there's no sort of chit chat at all. It's, he's quite a sort of fierce personality, I think, and doesn't take any nonsense from his band. But the sort of discipline and the artistry and the songwriting and that is just fantastic, I think. And so, yeah, that's about, I can't think of anything better than that, really. And so beautifully filmed and beautifully recorded, and the people are just look like they're having a good time, even though they're not there's no element of sort of self-indulgence in it really at all. So yeah.
You go to much.
Yes, I did see him once in Germany, in Berlin.
Oh yeah.
Yes, and it was a wonderful performance there. And I think Van Morrison is an artist that you might like one song. I used to like Moondance.
Yeah.
And then as you grow, you discover more and more of his compositions and his poetry. And it's just richer and richer, with Van Morrison's whole body of work.
Well, also although he's sort of getting on, his voice is just as good as it ever was. I mean, it's really fantastic. Whereas other aging rock stars, that they're not as lucky. But he doesn't look like he looks after himself particularly carefully. But his voice is just fantastic still, I think.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about that the other day. My decade is kind of the 80s or 90s, if I had to go back to a musical era. Which one's yours, Charles? Or do you feel decadeless? No, but seriously,
that would be telling, I think, wouldn't it?
I got stuck, like.
Yes.
If you had to give me a decade, it'd probably be the 90s.
I don't know, probably the 70s or 80s, I would say. A long time ago.
Were you a glam rock, Charles?
Sorry?
Were you into glam rock? I could see
No, not really. I did. Well, actually, when I was at the BBC, as a producer, I used to work on a pop program actually,
Which one?
and
one?
well, it was called Riverside,
Okay.
and it was sort of a sort of spin-off of the old Grey Whistle Test. I don't know.
Was it at Riverside Studios then? And is
Yes,
that why
it was. Yeah.
Riverside. Okay.
And this was about the sort of time of glam rock, and so I did little films with Wham, George Michael, and a few people that did very well. But the funny thing was we had a studio audience, and Boy George and his friends came and sort of sat in the audience, and they really were just getting going. And he wrote into the show and said, I've got this band Culture Club. Do you think we could be on your show? And I'm glad that I was not the recipient of that letter, because my colleague wrote on the official BBC paper a very patronizing letter saying, well, thanks so much for your interest in the show, George, and best of luck with the band, but I'm afraid we haven't got room for you on our show or something. And when Culture Club did a book about their career, this letter from my colleague was given a whole page to itself. So we should have had him on.
George Michael's sister, she used to teach French at the school I went to, and
really?
She left to go on the Wham Japan tour. So that's my little George Michael story. Yeah.
Right. Well. Okay. Interesting. Well, yeah. I actually did it. The only contact I had with him was actually when he was in bed. They had a concert coming up, or a series. I can't remember what it was, and he got flu, and he wanted to sort of apologize to the fans. So I was able to go out with a camera crew and film him in bed, sort of saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sick, I can't do the concert." And then after he finished filming, he managed to get himself up and got a lift back to London with me.
Went out clubbing or something.
And he brought a cassette with him, which was a sort of rough mix of Careless Whisper. And so I got an exclusive preview from George Michael of Careless Whisper in my cassette player in my Ford Fiesta on the way back to London. So that was exciting.
Wow. That's quite glamorous.
Yeah.
I'm impressed by that.
Yeah, that's so are you going to write your memoirs then?
No, I don't think
they
so.
sound fantastic.
I don't think I've really got enough
call it the
material
Bitcoin
for that.
years. Yeah.
Yes, that would be a separate volume.
Let's move on to crypto and Bitcoin a bit. Slatrish use the word crypto anymore.
Well, actually, music. I mean, music and crypto. You can put music on chain now. So if we kind of link them together in the sense of how do you see that? What are your views about being able to upload music tracks on chain?
Well, having seen Mandeep on your show, I did an interview with him, which is coming out on Coingeek Conversations next week, and he's incredible, I think, and really interesting. And I mean, not just for the sort of NFT part of it, but he was telling me all about how he does sort of exercises with a pen in his mouth to practice rapping, because it's sort of like a real musical skill, and he treats it just like practicing the saxophone. Well, Michael would know all about this, of course.
Wow.
The discipline of having to practice.
Yeah, with the pen in the mouth, it's about the articulation, and it's strengthening
to build up the muscles or something.
Yes, exactly.
Did you do that when you were practicing singing?
Well, I also practiced it, but also with, I don't know, when you open a wine bottle with this thing, I practice it actually. Is it
the corkscrew?
Bottle cap, no?
Yeah, this thing. It's a bit bigger than a pen. And then I practice also speaking in general.
Wow.
Well, what? So that just makes you speak more clearly, or something?
Yes, the articulation.
You ever heard
Hmm.
the expression that like talk with a plum in your mouth? Is that where that
Well,
kind of comes from?
yes, but that's not when you talk with a plum in your mouth. That is saying you're not speaking very clearly, I think,
Oh,
isn't it?
is it? Okay, fair enough. But I just get to say if you're using a cork or a
But
pen.
I think the thing about the pen and the corkscrew is that if you can sound okay with a pen in your mouth, then by the
Yeah.
time you get rid of it, you'll be sounding just so much better, I suppose. I don't know.
I really practiced it at the music conservatory. This was what I got from a teacher to learn.
Oh,
Yeah, so
well, so everyone was practicing with the corkscrew in their mouth.
yes.
I'd like to
Wow.
see a class of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you have like music lessons or also singing lessons, you have to forget anything about any shame or any feeling of
Dignity,
shame.
yeah.
Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Is that when they tell you as well to imagine everybody's naked, so that like when you're on stage, so that you don't feel embarrassed?
Let go of everything.
That's probably good life lessons, actually, isn't it? To, lose your fears and get to perform when things are hard as possible. And then when you take, like you say, when you take it out of your mouth, it suddenly gets 10 times easier. So, yeah, we should all do that.
So why were you interested in BSV then, Charles? Why particularly the BSV? Because you said
Well, I didn't even really know. The funny thing is, when I did the sort of got the job and did the interview, well, BSV didn't exist anyway. There was only Bitcoin Cash and BTC at that time. So they didn't really expect the people they were interviewing to know anything too much about it. In fact, they were quite gentle about, what it was, or almost even secretive, I would say. I wasn't, they didn't sort of like, and this is a problem when you're trying to get people to work in this area, because there's so much information that you need to sort of take on board to kind of orient yourself. And you can't really expect somebody to have absorbed all that before they've started. There just wouldn't be enough people. Well, maybe it's slightly changed now. There's probably more people who are interested. But 3 years ago, you couldn't be sort of looking for somebody who necessarily already knew about the difference between BTC and BCH and all that
Can I
sort of thing.
interrupt you there? I totally agree with that, because 3 years ago, I thought I knew quite a lot about Bitcoin. And then since, BSV and learning everything Craig's taught us, I realized I knew nothing much about Bitcoin. So it's been a huge learning curve, hasn't it? Along with Craig and Shadows and all the other Jimmy Wynn. And
Well, it's a funny subject, because I did, to start with, think, oh, well, so I'll just sort of, get myself up to speed with this subject, and I'm sure I'll be able to sort of get to the bottom of it in a few months or something at least. But there's always another sort of, it's a bit like climbing a mountain. There's always another sort of level, which you still don't quite, I find anyway, I still don't kind of quite understand. And, one of the sort of difficulties about doing journalism in this is you have to make some sort of guess or assumption about who the audience is and how much they know, because you can't explain everything every time you say something or write something. But on the other hand, you can't sort of leave people behind either, and narrow your audience by being too specialist. So that's quite a challenge, really. I think probably same sort of thing for you and your podcasts, I suppose.
No,
You want to sort of you want to. In fact, I was talking to I did an interview with Joshua Hensley 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were talking away about NFTs, and he sort of suddenly said, well, hang on, I don't need to say what an NFT is anymore, do I? And I mean, I said, no, I don't think you do, actually. But if it had been a year ago, I probably would have interrupted and said, oh, you mean a non-fungible token, or some sort of little thing like that, just so that it didn't look as though you had to know what it was. So, but that sort of point is moving the whole time, really, isn't it?
Definitely. And given that you've been interviewing people for the last 3 years, are you convinced by the BSV argument? Are you convinced that it's, technologically superior? How are you feeling about it?
I think it's technologically superior. I think the question is, what is the sort of business model that is going to sort of conquer the world? You can have fantastic technology, but it's only going to sort of really take over if somebody can create a business that actually makes a lot of money with it. The internet was an amazing invention, but then, the guy who invented eBay needed to sort of come along and work out that actually this is an incredible way of getting people to communicate and create a market without the company itself having to hold any of the goods, for instance. And that was a sort of terrific idea and just took off and started making huge profits. Google, when it started AdWords, discovered that they were onto this fantastically profitable business model. So profitable, in fact, that when they wanted to do their stock flotation, they put it off for as long as possible because they would have to reveal how profitable AdWords was. And they really wanted to keep that a secret from anybody else who might be thinking of getting into the same business, because it was just unbelievably profitable. And so I think that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the equivalent of somebody coming up with AdWords or something where there's just no question, it's going to make fantastic amounts of money. I mean, I'm not saying making money is everything, but that's what's going to really drive this thing forward, I think.
Do you think Tonic Powell is on the right kind of route?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a really clever idea, and potentially that could be that really could be an example of exactly what I'm saying. But who knows?
What do you think the barriers are? What are the things that we've really got to overcome?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, you can't rely on arguments that are, well, if everybody was using this thing, it would be fantastic because you can't get to that point. What we need is a little thing that the people who are using it, even if they're a small number of people, are having a fantastic advantage by using it straight away, and that will make it grow. So I'm sort of always looking for something where it draws people in. I mean, Crypto Fights is a good example of that, isn't it? Because people who are, I've had a look at it. I haven't really played it, I have to admit. It's quite complicated, isn't it? You have to sort of.
It does look it, yeah.
What?
I said it does look complicated. I've not played it myself yet, but I'm still itching to play it. But every time I get round to playing it, something else comes up, and I feel like I need a good day to sit down and really.
You have to read quite a lot of instructions, don't you?
Well, once you download it and get it up and running, you just enter and start playing.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I should have a go. But I mean, the good thing about that is that its audience are people who want to study it and get involved. And so they don't care whether BSV is going to be a big thing or not, or even that it's on BSV, I suppose. And so it's sort of self-sustaining in that respect, which is terrific.
What kind of business do you think would do exceedingly well on BSV?
I don't know. I mean, if I knew that, I'd be doing something about it,
Build
I suppose. Yeah, there's got to be. So micropayments is a terrific idea and a new thing, isn't it? But what is the business model? What is the use of micropayments? What thing can create a business that couldn't without that? That's the question, really, isn't it?
That's why I always come back to the betting industry with oracles and people like Ladbrokes or Betfred or Sky Bets. where you could put your horse racing betting on there or your dog race bets.
But why would that be better?
I just think because of the Oracle system on blockchain would probably be more efficient and more economical for the companies themselves if they moved over to that kind of processing with your triple ledger accounting as well. I don't know.
Transparency of it as well.
Yeah, I just feel that they would be really suited, and the same with, the gambling industry. We know with hand cash, there's a lot of games that have, that work really well on there as well. So just like roulette and blackjack and stuff like that would work really well. So that's why I think they would work. But in that sense, you can do like 5p bets on Ladbrokes or Sky Bets, and a 5p bet, something as small as that, would actually probably be really beneficial on blockchain technology on BSV.
But would it be something that the customer would be aware of, or could the customer just carry on?
I mean, the customer wouldn't have to be aware of it at all.
No.
I think just from the perspective of the business itself, if they were running on that with the micropayment system, I think that would work, especially when it comes to the 5p, 10p, 25p bets that you can do. I think it would be economically more viable for the business itself and for for blockchain itself if they were running on that, and the transparency as well, like you say.
Do we want gambling companies to be more successful?
No, but more transparency would be good. Do you not think? I
don't think. They're extremely highly regulated at the moment. I think, aren't they?
Isn't everything gambling these days? I mean, just the stock market, crypto.
Well,
isn't it all gambling in a way?
What I've seen from Becky Legiero's show on Coingeek is an interview she did about Kenze, and how Kenze is providing this opportunity for the regulators to have that greater transparency and at greatly lower cost. And listening to her show, the people that she interviews, I'm learning. I don't understand everything they're talking about, but I can see that there is that advantage there. And with the terminology of Bitcoin, it seems that some regulators shy away from that. They think, oh, what's that? There could be some misconceptions.
Because they don't understand it themselves.
By having these interviews more and more, we can all learn what's what and where the advantages lie. And even though we all are well tuned in, there's still so much for us to learn. Like you were saying, there's always another level to grow.
I do think that supply chains probably going to be a good area as well, don't you? I mean, Unisot has been around in this area for a while, but it does make sense to me that every little sort of detail of something can be added to the blockchain and easily accessible by multiple parties rather than being owned by one of them. That I would have thought that has got to be successful eventually.
Definitely, yeah.
And it definitely makes a lot of sense for in supply chain. What's your favourite topic to talk about then when it comes to blockchain?
Probably people and their sort of background and motivation and ideas for their business model, that kind of thing. I mean, in that respect, startups like any other, and they happen to be in this area rather than any other sort of field. But yeah, people's ideas for what they can do. I thought, I think that's it. Rather than some specific geeky detail of BSV or something.
Yeah, no, I can understand that, because I mean, entrepreneurship itself is fascinating, isn't it, as a subject? So
yeah, I think I'm sort of I'm more interested in the business end of it than the tech side of it. Although I'm sort of interested in technology and what you can do with it. But I used to work on the money program at the BBC. It was all about business. So I always had to come up with sort of ways of analyzing businesses and the choices they were having to make. So that is something that carries across quite well. So I'm very interested in Block Dojo and those startups there. And,
Yes, I think that's fascinating.
that'll be really interesting.
Have you been to the Block Dojo? Because you obviously you're not too far away from them. So
I have actually. We filmed their sort of opening day, and I'm going to see them again a couple of times during their 3-month sort of internship or whatever you call it.
Oh, cool. So is that going to be like a kind of docu interview kind of thing?
Yeah, we're going to make we've got this
thing that
we do called BSV Stories, which is like 10 or 15 minute videos. The last one was my colleague Sarah in Antigua. We saw that, but there've been a few.
I did see that. Yeah,
that was really good, I think. So it'll be sort of in another sort of edition of that series.
I did actually see a series of clips from the dojo the other day, actually, on Coingeek on YouTube. I don't know whether it was one of yours, Charles. Might have been. It was a series of clips from their workshop days, I think.
Oh yeah, maybe it was. Yeah. Well, there was the Bitcoin Association. They were filming it as well, so they might have got something out of it. I haven't actually edited the stuff that I've filmed yet.
Oh, do you edit yourself then, now, Charles?
Sometimes I do know how to do that, but when I say edit it, for something like that, I would probably work with an actual editor, but I would go through the material and pick the bits and write the script and stuff. So then somebody will probably put it together and polish it up, But with the sort of Skype things, then I will. Typically with the Coingeek conversations, I'll go through and sort of actually select the bits that we're going to do and make the cuts. And then I've got a colleague in the Philippines, or a couple of people who actually finish the show off and put it together.
You do a very nice job of it.
Yeah.
I think we've all remarked at some point like that you made us look a lot better than we remember it going. So,
Well, I always tell people who are a bit sort of worried about what they're going to say that we only use the good bits, and if either they or I say something stupid, we will get rid of it. I hope the same will be the case here as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Now, along those lines, though, I did want to ask, in watching your interviews, Charles, it is almost like you're a consultant because your questions are so on point and they really dig into the heart of the matter and challenge the guest, really. So how did you learn that? And what is your philosophy as an interviewer?
Well, I do think you've got to be genuinely, if you're going to do an interesting interview, you've got to have things that you are trying to understand that the person could tell you. And if I've read up about their work or whatever, then there will be sort of questions that I have about, well, you say that, but what about this, And so, I hope that it gives the person a chance to kind of state their case and, defend themselves. Because if you just say, well, everything you're doing is so fantastic, we're none the wiser by the end of it, really.
Which interviews do you prefer? Do you prefer being sort of at home in the studio, or do you prefer being out and about? And do you like the foreign travel side of things? I mean, are you a jet setter? Do you like the jet set?
Well, I used to like going around. I mean, it's been so difficult recently. It's such a sort of faff to, fill in all the forms and everything to get on a plane, isn't it? I think I don't know about you, but I sort of feel like I've kind of got more used to being at home and doing stuff at home, and
very much.
I'm sort of, it takes a bit more of an extra sort of incentive to to say, oh yes, that would be great, I'd love to go there. You know, it has to be something sort of slightly, whereas before I just anywhere I'd be happy to go, you know. You just get sort of, well, I hope we're getting out of that now. I hope we're getting back to the way things were in that respect. But
Let's hope.
Some kind of
yeah.
normalcy. So I have a question for you, okay, Charles. So Rishi Sunak recently was talking about Bitcoin and CBDCs and how they can be programmable. So I wondered what you thought about the pros and cons of programmable CBDCs run by government.
God, this sounds like an exam question. I didn't know this was coming up. Well,
when you did this to me and Ruth, you put us right on the spot. Probably as well. So.
Well, does programmable mean like a smart contract type thing?
Like
where...
you could program things in, like if you, I think specifically you were saying something like if your employer, say a government employer, could pay you with your CBDC, but there could be a stipulation in there that you can only spend it on certain items, and certain items would not be allowed, and if certain items were bought, then you would have your money frozen. So I'm assuming in this kind of way that they're saying it, I mean, you know, you can't go out and buy a load of Coke, because if you do that, we're going to stop you from having your money. You have to spend it on items like, you know, a roof over your head, your bills, food. You can go out and enjoy yourself, but if you do anything illegal with it, then we will be able to actually stop your money. You know, just like
I don't think they
see it.
Yeah, I don't think that would be very popular. I mean, I think there would be sort of cries of outrage about people's right to do what they wanted with their own money, wouldn't there?
The way I imagine it is, I imagine that they'll start it with the benefits class first.
Right.
And they'll say, oh, these people on benefits, you know, we're going to have to limit their... you know, it'll start with something that sort of people can imagine might be more reasonable, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it may not be, if you look at the other side of the coin and you were to say, we'd like to give you some extra money, which you can use for educational purposes or something like that, or to buy things that your doctor has prescribed or approved of or something, then perhaps that would seem much more acceptable than here's your money that is just your ordinary money and you can't do this or that with it. So it may not be quite as black and white as, oh, that's a terrible thing politically. Do you think?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Pros and cons.
Still very prescriptive, though, isn't it?
Well, it is, but you know, I don't know. We do sort of require people to do things in society, don't we? We require them to pass a driving test, to drive a car, and you know, obey the law and stuff. So, you know, this is something that you have to. This is something you can or can't do with money. Might sort of almost come into the same category, I suppose. But this is a sort of classic libertarian type argument, I would imagine, isn't it? Really. You're very against it, Ruth, I think.
I'm very against it, yeah. I think any kind of stepping into those realms, because they might be doing something you agree with one day, but then, you know, the next day be doing something you really don't agree with. Once you kind of open the door on that kind of regulation or whatever, or lack of regulation of the government.
But if it was something you could volunteer to sort of engage with, would that make it okay?
No, because I think that anything that you volunteer to engage with very quickly becomes mandatory.
If it's a government
thing. I just think it's a slippery slope. They'll introduce it with something that sounds really reasonable. And then pass a load of legislation that then, you know, the next month it's, you know, if you're chronically ill and signed off sick, you can only go to X, Y, and Z supermarket or whatever, and only buy X, Y, and Z things. I don't know. I just think it will quickly turn into a sort of a slave society if we're not careful. People should be allowed to make mistakes and spend their money badly. I think that's fundamental.
Do you go along with what Joshua Hensley was telling me on a couple of weeks ago, which is that income tax is a terrible idea and should never have been allowed?
I wouldn't go that far. No, I'm not against income tax. I'm very I love the NHS, or at least I used to. I'm not quite so enamored with it lately, but as a concept, so I'm all in favour of us using a shared pot of money to do big projects. I think that's fine. But
Right. But
actually,
only the ones you like.
no, I think that there's a middle way here. Like, I don't want to live in anarchy, but then I also don't want to be told what I can spend my money on either.
For example, with pensions, okay, now we know that they've made a mess of pensions. So would a CBDC be something that would actually stop them from spending your pension on something that, and making a mess of it completely for everybody else? Because there would be
earmarked, it would be like put in a pot
to that, to say, look, this is this is pension money, and this is what this money is for, and we need this for this.
Ring fenced,
so
like
you can't do X, Y, Z with it, because otherwise there might not be any pension money for the pensioners. That's kind of where I was coming from, and the kind of illegal activity. Whereas,
But are you saying that the government can raise money in taxes as long as it's specified as to how it's going to be spent in a particular
it's
area?
difficult. I suppose it's difficult to kind of know what's on Rishi's mind at the moment, because it was only such a small kind of 2-minute section of him saying about the Bank of England, looking into the Bank of England with Bitcoin, issuing a CBDC, but it will be programmable. So that just opens up many areas, but some of those areas are, if it's the Bank of England CBDC, then it's also, that applies to government regular spending as well. So, for example, with the PPE fiasco, they wouldn't be able to overspend to their friends with government CBDC, which isn't actually going to benefit anybody.
But who would restrain them from that?
I don't know.
I guess the Treasury could, because government departments often overspend, and they have to get their money from the Treasury. I suppose the Treasury could say, here's your money, but we're going to know if you overspend. But then that sort of is the case already, I think,
I don't know. I mean, there was a gentleman I saw a couple of weeks ago in Parliament. I think he actually resigned because his job was to make sure that there was no fraud in government, and there was like 35, whatever it was. Don't quote me on the amount.
Yeah.
It was a huge amount, and he was, if I can't stop the fraud, then I should not be in this job. And I wondered whether or not if them issuing the CBDCs would actually maybe help.
I'm not sure, because in the end, it's still money being spent, and somebody's going to have to make a judgment as to whether this company receiving the money is sort of worthy of it or not. And that judgment won't be really changed by whether the money's conventional money or CBDC money, I would have thought. It's all sort of a messy kind of human problem.
And they have these emergency regulations as well, don't they? So they always pass an emergency bill that says, all normal processes are suspended, and it's a free for all. We can chuck ridiculous amounts of money at vaccine passport projects and stuff.
Isn't that the point with a CBDC, that there isn't you can't just keep printing and printing and printing, because there would only ever be, or do you think with a CBDC that's exactly what they would do?
I think you can keep on printing, can't you? Can't they
That's
just
the
keep
thing.
on...
I mean, not if they use Bitcoin, but if they use anything they make up themselves, they can,
Yeah, CBDC is Well, it is a central bank digital currency, so the
So do you
central
think they
bank
would
can have,
just
it
do
can
the
be as
same
much
thing?
or as little of it as they like, I think, can't it?
Mm.
Okay.
It could be what they're doing now, but on steroids. Really,
Well, yes, it would mean it would.
theoretically.
Well, I think one of the arguments is that rather than trying to sort of stimulate the economy by whatever they do with sort of government bonds, and that's the quantitative easing, this money could be sort of injected directly into people's wallets or
Okay.
whatever, and so it would have the same effect as quantitative easing, but a much more direct, and
direct,
perhaps
yeah.
more efficient way of doing that. Because if you want to stimulate the economy, then you need to get the money into people's pockets as quickly and directly as possible.
That's right, because the banks only create money at the moment at the point of the stroke of a pen on a loan, don't they? So that's really the only way that new money comes into the economy at the minute.
I mean, I suppose in the end, a country's currency will still depend on sort of people's international views of the dependability and reliability of that government. And so if you think the government is just going to create more and more central bank digital currency, just as you might think they're going to go crazy with quantitative easing, it'll just have exactly the same effect, that
Right, yeah.
there'll be lots of confidence in that currency. I don't know. I don't really know what I'm talking about here. So,
Do you think it would be transparent? I mean, it's going to be more transparent though, isn't it? If it's on blockchain.
I don't know. Do you think so? I mean, if I look at blockchain, it doesn't look very transparent to me. It looks like
Well, you can see the transactions. You don't necessarily.
Well, you can,
know
but I
who
mean,
they
God,
are.
if you see that on a national scale, I mean, are you really going to be able to? Are there going to be people who can look at the blockchain and say, "Oh, look at this one here. This is not what we
I'm
thought."
sure there would be fraud investigators who literally spend their entire day just looking at blockchain transactions. I'm sure there would be many anomalies that would be like, oh, maybe it gets to a certain amount and it flashes up.
I mean, I don't want to sound too cynical, but many new technologies, if you go back as far as the railways or the canals or whatever, are supposed to solve all sorts of social problems and are kind of advertised as being the answer to all these current social issues.
Panacea.
And they often turn out to solve other problems, but they're not. We never sort of particularly think, oh, well, thank God for, even with the internet, which has a massive influence, we don't think, oh, thank God, what a much better world we live in now. It's just different, and there are things we can do that we couldn't do before. But, the sort of wrongs of society have not exactly been solved by technology.
No, I mean, there are several other issues as well, like to the fact that the internet could get turned off, or a solar flare could knock your satellite out, and then you can't actually use the CBDC because there is no signal. I mean, you can still use a blockchain offline, but maybe not your wallet or something. So there is that side of things.
I still think that's just as much of a problem now, Diddy, though. Everything is pretty much digital already.
Like when fiat was backed by the gold standard, there was something backing it. There wasn't, and then Nixon got rid of the gold standard, and it was just fiat, and that's when the problems have literally kind of economically, monetary wise, just risen since then because of this continuous just printing.
But remember, there was the 1930s and the problems of the depression and stuff. Sorry,
was that the big depression, the Wall Street?
Yeah, the Great Depression. I mean I'm not really an expert on this, but that was before America came off the gold standard, and the 2008 financial crisis, which was a massive thing, was in a way, I would say, helped by the fact that they could print more money and there was quantitative easing, and instead of the whole financial system collapsing, they managed to kind of kick-start it again just before it was going to collapse. You wouldn't be able to do that if you were on the gold standard, I think, or on your limited Bitcoin world.
Question is whether you believe that it was really going to collapse. I mean, I think that's something that people has assumed is true, but it may have just been that, you know, there was a big sort of destruction, you know, in the banking sector, and then it would find its feet again eventually. I don't know. It's really difficult because we'll never know, because we'll never be able to take the other path.
It wasn't particularly in anyone's interests to pretend that it was going to collapse if it wasn't going to, was it?
I don't know. The banks got an awful lot of liquidity, new liquidity out of it, didn't they?
There's
And then
always
they could mark everything to,
Well, yes, I suppose
you know,
so.
whatever valuation they wanted rather than to the market.
And there's always somebody who's really good at trading that makes a lot of money out of a crash. I don't personally know how you do this myself, but I know there are people
Shorting,
that
generally, yeah.
Yeah.
As I missed the first half an hour, so I don't know which question you already asked. So I'd rather.
We've covered 19th century American novelists, I think.
Weirdly. and the Archers extensively. Yeah.
The greatest interview experience in life that you ever had.
Well, the most difficult one was Mark Zuckerberg, I think, because I got commissioned from BBC Two to do a documentary about Facebook. And I talked to Facebook and they sort of said, you know, yeah, fine, we'll help. And, you know, yeah, we'll get Mark Zuckerberg lined up. And as we started filming it and we went to the States several times to the Facebook offices and interviewed people, it became sort of more and more obvious that the people we were talking to weren't really sort of in charge of his schedule or necessarily able to tell him, oh, by the way, we've agreed that the BBC can interview you. So fortunately, I'd planned a couple of trips because I sort of thought this might happen on the first trip, and that at least then they would be feeling a bit guilty that they hadn't produced him. And then so we went back, and then it turned out there was this big conference they were having and that he was ill with flu before the conference. And so we couldn't interview him then. And then he was going to go straight back to bed after the conference, so he couldn't interview him then. Anyway, it all just got really ridiculous. And eventually they said, all right, well, you can interview him in this little black cupboard in the conference area where there's thousands of people all going past, and you know, so it looked terrible and you couldn't really hear what he was saying anyway. So I sort of said, well, you know, this is no good, it's just not going to work, you know, because this was supposed to be used over a whole sort of like 60-minute film. So then he had a bodyguard, and he said, well, you know, before yesterday or the day before, I came to check out this venue, and there is an attic at the top where there's nothing really. It's sort of, you know, just dust and things and not used for anything, but it is quiet. So then we had sort of like 10 minutes to get everything that we needed up into this attic. And he agreed to come up there and sit down and be interviewed. And fortunately, you see the shot and you see sort of a little bit of wall, but you've got no idea that he's sitting in kind of a pile of rubble and there's sort of, you know, dead rats around the place and stuff. But so we did get it. Not very long, but just about enough to make it look in the film as though we had got an interview with him. And then I got people from his office to film him sort of at his desk and stuff like that, and just send us little bits. So it was all about trying to give the impression that we had better access than we did. I mean, everything he said was fine, and it was all, you know, but you wouldn't have, I don't think you would have guessed how close to not getting an interview at all we were. Wow. So that was kind of perhaps my worst interview. I don't know.
Did you interview Trump at one point?
Yeah, I did do a film about Donald Trump before he was seriously into politics.
Oh right, and did you actually get to interview him directly?
Mm-hmm.
And he was okay, was he?
It was all worked out. We got, you know, we filmed him in Scotland, in New York, and in Las Vegas. And so we got lots of interviews, and with his wife and with his children and everything. the only sort of interestingly sort of tricky thing about that was that I turned up with the crew and the presenter and everything, and we were sort of, the idea, according to him and his PR people, was we're going to just sort of say hello and get to know you, and we can talk about what you want to do, kind of thing. So he turned up on one evening in New York at his place, and then he sort of said, "Okay, we'll do the interview tomorrow morning. Be here by 9 o'clock or something." And we just were not really geared up for this. And if you want to sort of do a whole hour with somebody, you really want a chance to talk to them at some length. But it was a clever way of his sort of finding out what we were going to be like and what we were going to be doing. Because if he didn't like the interview that we did the next morning, then he didn't need to kind of agree to take part in the rest of the film, I suppose. And we, wanted to make sure that we did get access for the rest of the film. We'd go to his hotel in Las Vegas and all that stuff. So I think that was quite a smart move, really, to surprise us by saying, "Yeah, you can do an interview. How about tomorrow morning?" It was okay. It all worked out all right.
So,
really. I mean,
kind of a smooth operator then, like we think we've
Well,
been told. Right? Yeah.
I would say he's pretty savvy with with the media. He knows exactly what he's what's going to come out in the newspapers or the or on television or whatever. That's what he's brilliant at, really.
Because people often try to make out that he's a bit of an idiot, but I don't think he is he? That's not the impression I've always had of him.
He's not stupid, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I think he's quite
unrelated to Trump, but do you have any or what's your favorite app in the BSV space?
it's perhaps more.
Well, do you count Handcash as an app?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I'm very sorry that Gravity is.
I am. Yeah.
I don't know quite what's happened with Gravity. I also think SentB is very good, and I like the fact that you can actually sort of do a lot of useful things with SentB. I mean, not specifically if you're in the UK, but in Africa, it's amazing, and you can buy things and pay for your electricity and all that sort of thing. So that's really good, I think. I suppose.
Yeah, Rory's been getting a lot of use out of it, haven't you, lately?
Yes, I
Yeah,
have.
because in the US they seem to have a lot of shops that you can spend it in now.
Yes, all over the world. You simply choose your country inside the shop section of the SentB app, and then all of the different locations pop up, and you can choose to buy the e-gift card.
Yeah, it's all. I've never really quite understood how that gift card things. What you buy the gift card, and then you just use the gift card to buy the thing.
Exactly. Yes. So,
But then don't you get left with a bit of spare money on the gift card that isn't useful?
well, it depends. You could purchase the e-gift card at the point of sale, as long as you have a clear data connection. So you'd be purchasing the gift card for the amount that you were going to use.
The exact amount, right?
Well, it could be near enough, yes.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I did go to Walmart and buy an e-gift card, and then there was a remainder. And so then I just paid cash for the few dollars remainder that I had.
You mean you were actually in the shop?
Yes, I was at the Walmart and I used the e-gift card to purchase some Christmas gift items and also some frozen salmon. And then there was a bit of a remainder. So I just then paid the $3 remainder, over that. So I felt like they had mentioned it at the Coingeek conference. And as we were coming up on this end of year show, I thought, well, I want to follow through and see what that process is. So I did go shopping there. And then later, to go even further, I took my good girlfriend out to Chili's. And we had such a hoot because we spent the majority of the time trying to take a picture. And everybody was so annoyed. We were just sitting there posing with the fajitas the whole time.
They must have
But-
thought it was for your Instagram or something.
Yeah, seriously, trying to get the right camera angle. But we
But-
were yucking it up. Yeah.
But when you used your Cent B, I mean, what was your conclusion? Did you think, oh, this is really useful? Or did you just think, oh, well, I could have just given my Visa card?
Yes, so I did think that there was this extra level of activity that you had to do beyond just using your card, your regular Visa, MasterCard, what have you. But I thought that as far as for the usefulness of Bitcoin, it was good because if you were receiving an income in Bitcoin, then you can use it in practical ways in your own neighborhood through Centy's e-voucher system.
Right. I remember, I can't remember exactly who I was talking to, somebody to do with wallets and stuff. And they said that when the price of the value of Bitcoin goes up, that's when people start spending money because they feel rich and they sort of think, that whereas I would have expected almost the other way around, that if the value goes up, then people were saying, oh my God, I shouldn't spend this thing because it's really making me a lot of money now. But it seems to be the psychology is I've made a profit, so let's spend it before it disappears, which I suppose makes sense. Really.
That does kind of make sense, I think, because if you never do spend it, then it can go up and down and up and back down again, before you know it, and especially in Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Stefan Matthews, and he's got this story about how he could have bought, I don't know how many, 50,000 Bitcoins or something for $500 or something.
Oh, yeah.
And it would have been worth, I sort of did a back of an envelope calculation, would have been worth $10 billion. So he said no. But so I said, well, do you think that was the worst business decision of your life? And he said, and I think it's reasonable, really. He said, well, no, not really, because how would I have known when to spend it?
Yeah.
I might have paid $500. Would I have spent it when it was 5,000 or 50,000 or 500,000 or 5
That's
million
the problem.
or whatever?
Yeah.
And by the time, if I just hung on to it, I probably would have lost the private keys anyway. So he convinced me that he wasn't upset about it, really. Although,
to be fair, though, he learned from it, didn't he? Because he now runs Tao, does he?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
He's just stepped down as CEO, actually. But yeah, I mean, he said he wouldn't have kind of been involved in the whole Bitcoin world if it hadn't been for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably a good thing came out of it.
2 last questions. One is, do you have any suggestions for the BSV space?
I don't know, really. I'd like to see. I think we need to sort of really get to the bottom of how you get things on chain, how you get sort of files and things on chain. And I'd like to see a really easy way of putting a drawing on chain or something, and knowing where it is and being able to get back to it and sending it to people and having some sort of control over things in a very user-friendly way. I think that could be very good, for licensing. I mean, the whole thing about NFT art is, to me, sort of very complicated because the thing itself is sitting somewhere else or whatever. And that if we could just, I mean, I think this is coming, isn't it? There are people uploading more and more larger files to the chain. And so I think something exciting is going to come out of that soon, I hope.
When you were at the dojo, was there anybody working on anything particularly that you actually kind of liked? So I remember speaking to, I think Laura's doing something, and then there was a Chinese lady that I met who's got a 3D art gallery, and then there's Richard who's got his game coming out. So was there anything that particularly stood out to you as a really fresh idea?
I mean, to be honest, I wasn't really paying close attention because we were sort of trying to film it and be in the right place and press record and, you know, have people in the lights in the right place. So I wasn't really paying full attention as I should to the content of people's presentations. But I hope that when I go back there, I'll have be able to take a more intelligent interest. I mean, I did think there was a good range of things, and some of the sort of almost more boring kind of financial type things I thought the people sounded like they knew what they were talking about and were quite impressive. It's interesting with these sort of people with their startup ideas. Should you be very practical and limited and say, let me explain to you exactly what I'm going to do? Or should you be the kind of entrepreneur with a sort of massive vision and huge ambition, but some sort of vagueness about how you get from here to there? I'm not quite sure. It's quite a sort of interesting thing with entrepreneurs as to, you know, if you had to bet on a kind of entrepreneur who's going to do well, what sort of psychology would you be looking out for? And I think the answer is you want something that is going to be very interesting and very successful with a small group of people to start with, but that can become an example of something much bigger. So that, for instance, Amazon started with books, and people who wanted to buy books were delighted and sort of went and told people about it. But then the model could be expanded pretty much as it was to all sorts of other categories. So I think that's a pretty good model for, you know, how to have a business idea that is going to be big. It's no good if it's just got an incredible ambition for the whole world, because it needs to have something that keeps people motivated at every step of the way between here and there, you know.
Oh, that's a good point. So make a proof of concept and then try and apply the same model to
proof of concept
everything else you can find.
You know, that your first customers will be so happy with that they
So
will tell
thrilled
everybody about it.
Yeah. Solves a kind of a real hair on fire problem for them.
Well, Uber's a kind of good example of that, I think. You know, if you first use Uber, you're kind of amazed. Well, I was anyway.
I still am.
Yeah.
Every time I use it.
You know, so that you will probably tell somebody, have you tried this thing? Because it's like magic, you know.
I always think the same about books, actually, because, you know, when you used to go and buy a book, you'd have to, like, get to the shop and then walk around the shop to find the damn book and everything. And the idea that you can pick the exact thing that you want out without having to walk around several shops to find it, it's amazing to me. Even now, I think it's just incredible.
I mean, Jeff Bezos's kind of insight about that was, the thing about books is that there are a huge number published, but each copy of each copy is exactly the same as every other copy.
Yeah.
And that was what made it successful, and meant that, you know, he would be better off than a bookshop, because a bookshop could never have a copy of everything. And in fact, in the early days, he didn't have a copy of everything either. He just had a small warehouse, and he just ordered it from the publisher if somebody wanted it, which actually your local bookshop could do as well.
Right.
But it gave people the idea, and he had the catalogue. You could search the catalogue for millions of books, which is not a service that a bookshop would offer, although they might do it for you, I suppose.
Yeah,
and I did a film about them, and interviewed some poor guy who was originally hired by Amazon to write reviews of books and put them on the front page of the website. It was almost like a literary magazine to start with, and then unfortunately, sort of technology took over, and they invited customers to write their own reviews, and then they put some of the customers' reviews up on the front page alongside the professional editors' reviews, and then they just ruthlessly measured the click-through rate and the sales rate between the professional writers and the customer reviews. And of course, with millions of customers, the chances are that one of them is going to write a review that will sell a book better than your editor is going to. So that job unfortunately disappeared.
Oh yes, I hadn't thought of it like that. That's the thing. He's like cutting out the middleman in all sorts of areas, isn't he? He's just sort of cutting costs at every turn.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very clever.
And
Yeah.
it's sad because, you know, people's jobs in the high street and their local community is, you know, impoverished by that, really.
Have you uploaded any NFTs yourself? Have you attempted to upload any?
No, I've created a token.
Oh, what's
Which-
it called?
Charles Miller token.
I think it's called a Charles Miller token or something like that. Anyway, it's on Relay. I need to find it again, but I'd be happy to send it out to anyone who's interested. It'd be very valuable in years to come, I think.
Yes,
We'll have one. We'll take one.
definitely.
I need to find out. I think they exist. I just need to work out exactly how to send it. But yeah, no, I haven't created any NFTs, just Ps.
In RelayX, it is quite an easy process to actually make an FT, which is your fungible token, and your NFT, which is a non-fungible token.
Yes.
And when in RelayX, if you go to NFT, that's where you can also upload your audio files as well. So that's also quite an easy process. It was just interesting because you said about when Mikey said about apps and anything, you know, any suggestions for a space. You said about having a kind of probably a really nice UI then to be able to have your NFTs all in one place.
But supposing I took a sort of audio recording that was, I don't know, 100 megabytes or something, I couldn't really upload that, could I?
No, at the moment, no, because it is literally only 10 megabyte limit. But yeah, so 100 meg you wouldn't be able to. But yeah, so I see what you're saying. Okay. So anything above that, say a full album or a 3-hour podcast, would be a bit difficult.
Yeah, but that'll come, I suppose.
Well, somebody in the space has done a 6-hour documentary. I'm sure you're in it, and you probably know something about this 6-hour documentary. I'm sure you've probably helped and advised. There was, when they were uploading it to the blockchain, like a 6-hour documentary. What was it, about 15 gig or something, Ruth? I mean, it was huge.
It was, but it was reduced down to just over a gig, I think, in the end. So, but it's still a heck of a file. I don't know. No, I don't know. But I think I was like looking it up today. I don't know why I was looking it up, but I was. That op push data, I think, takes about 4 meg per transaction. So it will have to be split into a heck of a lot of files, transactions, sorry, I think.
But then how do you watch it? Do you have to download it?
No, I think you can, I think there's a player.
Put your the transaction address in, and then it would literally, it's like a, it's just like
it's
a video.
Good question, though.
It'll jump from one bit to the next.
Yeah.
Just like the way internet splits up a signal into little bits and pieces and then reassembles it.
Reconstitutes it, sort of thing.
Yeah. Like Willy Wonka.
Did you have something to do with it, Charles? You did?
No, but funny enough, I did hear about it this morning.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to interview the person concerned.
We'll see, I guess. Just to mention, there's bitcoinfiles.org where you can go and drop files on that and upload them. But it's upload any file under 218 megabytes.
Oh.
And I have used that before.
I have seen a couple of videos that
I think that's Matterpool offers that, I think it is, but I'm not sure.
But then you'd have to pay a lot to do that.
Yeah.
But
you know, to have it there on chain is kind of forever, isn't it? So, you know, I think for something it's worth it.
Say, for example, you're doing videos and you consider what a server would cost on a monthly ongoing basis. It probably literally, you know, maybe in the long run, because you know, if you stop work and you can't afford to keep paying your server, then you can't paying for it. But if you have a all on chain and you've paid for it at that point in time when you've uploaded it, then that is always going to be on chain. So I do see a real use case for that.
But if supposing I wrote a book and did that, it would just, how would I limit people seeing it to people who are going to pay for it?
I think two ways. One is you could encrypt it, and you could get people to pay to decrypt it or unencrypt
So then
it.
I just send them the password to decrypt it.
Perhaps. I mean, it might be based on a token, or it might be a paywall. You know, like mail, you can encrypt your mail, and then you pay the fee, and then it unencrypts it. Oh, what was my other thing? I had two options there. I've forgotten the other one. But basically, maybe there needs to be a viewer to be able to see it. So, like, the fact that it's on chain, it's still kind of gibberish, really, isn't it? Until you run it through, a player or a website interface. So there's a sense in which maybe it'd be not worth the hassle of trying to view your file on chain without the viewer that someone's paid to use.
Able to embed it
into a page, yeah.
But then in the end, it may be in a secure place, but the process by which you provided access to people or charged people to reach that secure place on the blockchain or access it might not be secure any more than somebody else might get my Netflix password,
If somebody has to log in with their wallet to view it and to pay a small fee to look at it, that's pretty secure, isn't it?
I suppose you could say, yes, if you sent it if you said it can only be seen by the person with this wallet. In other words, it's like on some websites you can specify the email address, or like on a Google Doc, you can say share this with this person.
Yeah, so
the person has to have that email address.
Would you be able to do that in the op return then? I mean, would you be able to write in the op return that this person with this wallet would be able to view this particular contract?
No, I don't think so. It's not that so much. It's just a question of, releasing the paywall, either decrypting it or showing it, putting it behind some interstitial or something so that it can't be viewed.
What's that book app? I always forget the name of.
Kindle.
No, the one on chain.
Oh,
Canonical.
Canonic.
Oh,
do you use that at all, then, Charles? Have you used Canonic?
Yeah.
No, I haven't actually. I'd like to try that.
Yeah, I'd like to try that.
Yes, I did buy a book on there once, and then once I bought it, I don't know where it went on my computer, so I never read the book. So I'm still looking for that book by Isaac
I know what you mean, Rory. Yeah, because I bought an Isaac Morehouse.
Somewhere on my computer.
Downloaded it on my iPad, and I agree with you. It's like it's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
How many books has Isaac? How many books has that guy written? I mean,
quite a few.
I think I've got 3 of his songs actually.
Right. He seems
Isaac
to be
Morehouse has released songs.
Wow. Yeah, he's like quite a good musician as well. He plays guitar and he sings. Yeah, it's really
cool.
Yeah.
I never knew. He should come to your music party on the 1st.
Yeah. We got to invite him on the show.
Yes.
What are your wishes for the future?
Live happily ever after.
Yay.
I don't know really. For me or for the world?
It's an open question.
Well, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Surprisingly difficult question.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I do hope that this turns out to be the start of something big, really, because if it is, all of the things that we and people that we talk to a lot have been doing will be very interesting to people in the future. I think there's a reasonable chance of that. And so, that would be if suddenly everything that we've done over the last 2 or 3 years, or people working in this area or writing about it or whatever, that'll be part of history. And so, I mean, that's an exciting thing. And, you know, I just hope it doesn't take too long, because we always seem to be on the brink of some sort of like the breakthrough. But funnily enough, I used to work for a tech startup in London, and it was a small company that has, I think, gone bust now. But I was surprised there that it always seemed like in 6 months' time, everyone's going to be using this thing, and we'll all be multimillionaires, and it'll be fantastic. Or it will have collapsed, and we've all gone bust, and we've all gone home.
Memory.
But actually, I worked there for 2 or 3 years, and neither of those things ever happened while I was there. And I feel a little bit the same with Bitcoin SV, that you sort of feel like, well, at least in a year's time, we'll know what's happening. And actually, business, you know, life just goes on, and it's definitely moving in the right direction. But you still feel that there's a way to go, and, you know, everything to play for still, really, I suppose.
I think it's that thing, isn't it, where everything, like, you underestimate what can be done in, you overestimate what can be done in 10 years and underestimate what can be done in 5, something like that. There's a saying a bit like that.
Yeah, it's a sort of tech development.
Yeah, where it's sort of long and short at the same time.
I can't even remember which way round that is.
I can't. I don't know why I started on it.
I have a personal example. I started a garden last year, and I did get some tulips, and they were perennials. And then winter came, and I just kept watering this one potted plant, and covered it up with dead leaves in the winter to prevent the chill. And then just this morning, I noticed the green sprigs sprouting up in the flower pot. And I thought, I'm so happy I kept watering it.
Yeah.
You know, all that time, there was nothing.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. And then now it's time already, and there it is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great. Just one tulip.
Who knows? We'll see. Maybe 2.
I hope so.
I think there were 3 in the pot.
It's a good analogy, though, Rory.
Spring is coming.
Keep watering.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you so much, Charles, for coming and speaking to us. We really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you
you're a
very
fascinating guy, and with, you know, lots of wonderful, interesting stories you've got of interviewing people and all the places you've been. Thank you for coming on, and we hope to see you again soon in other capacities and other exciting projects and developments.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really fun, actually, and really enjoyed it.
I'm very much looking forward to reading your memoirs, Charles.
Oh, good. Thank you for the encourament about writing my memoirs. They'll be dedicated to you, Diddy, if I ever get published.
Okay, I'm pressing on. Bye.
Thank you very much.